Welcome to the D-Shift podcast, where we provide inspiration, motivation, and education to help you transition from the challenges of divorce to discover the freedom and ability to live life on your own terms. Are you ready? Let's get this shift started. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the D-Shift. And as with all of the episodes that we record, the effort is not just to focus on divorce and all of kind of the things that we have to do during that process, which can be really hectic, but also how can we have healthier relationships going forward. So today I have somebody who's a specialist in that area, and I want to introduce you to Amanda McKoy Flanagan. She is a licensed master social worker, and she has moved from an urban environment to a more rural environment. And she really uses that nature-inspired approach to help people understand love, loss, and what they need to do to heal and get well and become whole people on their own. She is an author, podcaster, and motivational speaker, as well as a certified intuitive grief coach. So Amanda, welcome.
Hi, Marty. Thank you so much for having me today.
And I know I just barely scratched the surface of all the things that you've done and you do and all the services you provide. What got you into this area? Like, why did this become your focus?
So I got sober in 2006, and a huge part of recovery is spiritual life. And I've just been on this self-reflective sort of healing journey for the last 18 or so years. And then grief really just kind of took a hold of me. I had a boyfriend in recovery who passed away. We were both 8 months sober. He overdosed. I've had multiple other family members pass away, drug addiction, various reasons. I moved to Colorado from New York, like you said, in 2015. And within a 3-year span of time, I had 5 very significant family members pass away within 3 years. And my brother was the last one to go. And when my brother, I didn't really choose this line of work. I don't think anybody chooses grief work. It kind of chooses us. But when my brother passed away, all of the grief that I had stored and I had never processed and I had never healed, as well as the trauma from my childhood and just various events that happened from early on, up into my parents' divorce, my dad cheating on my mom, all this stuff that I was just unhealed, just came up in 2018, and I could not kind of stuff it anymore. I didn't think I was. I mean, at this point, I was already sober 12 years, and I had been doing the work. I'd been working my steps. I'd been in therapy. I hadn't really had a solid meditation practice at that point, and I think that's when things really shifted for me. I'll get into that later. But it was this sort of, I couldn't deny the stuff that I thought I had dealt with, but truly hadn't. And it was really wrapped up around in self-worth. It really all came down to self-worth and self-love that I thought I had, but I really hadn't. I was kind of just telling myself or fooling myself. And then when my brother died, I had this wild spiritual awakening that affected my marriage, which is why I'm here with you guys today. So what happened was so let me go back to Mike, my boyfriend in recovery, who died when I was 8 months sober. I was really distraught and torn apart by that. But after about 3 months, I kind of was like, I think I'm all right. I started kind of looking around again, dating, and I met my now husband 5 months after Mike had passed away. And I didn't do any grief healing at all around that time. I had just been talking with my sponsor and stuff like that, but I just didn't want to feel it anymore, which is what I know now. And I jumped into a relationship to kind of distract myself or not feel it, to kind of fill the void is what I've learned. Then, I got married, life got good. Everything was great. I had a couple kids, moved to Colorado. Then my brother dies. 3 months again, laying in bed, crying, totally devastated over the death of my brother. I decide, and that was March, I decided in about June, I'm good. I dealt it. I felt it. I was in therapy for a few months. I was like, I think I'm all right. I think I'm good. So 5 months after my brother dies, I actually go to a concert, Pearl Jam, which was mine and my brother's favorite, which I'm actually going to tomorrow. They're playing in New York. I'm going there for 2 nights. I'm psyched. And I meet this group of people that I feel so connected to on such a authentic, deep level. And one person in particular, I had met a guy, and I felt a connection, like an energetic, magnetic kind of spiritual, deeper connection that I had never felt with anybody, not even my husband. And it wasn't just this one person, it was the whole scene, the whole group. And I said to myself, why don't I feel this comfortable at home? Why do I feel like there's this like invisible shield almost between me and my husband that I just couldn't get through? I just couldn't get to him, you know? Now, my husband's a 9/11 first responder. He retired after 25 years as a New York City police officer and a fireman. And he has chronic respiratory illness, and he's also 12 years older than me. So I come home and I tell my husband, I don't love you. I don't think I ever loved you. Because whatever I felt there, I just was like, what is that? Like, that's what love must be. Not, don't believe everything you feel, really is the message. So he says to me, you know, Amanda, like, your brother just died 5 months ago. Do you think maybe your grief is playing a part? Now, like I said, I'm 12 years sober. My husband's also sober. And we have enough recovery under our belt to know that typically what presents on the surface is not really what's going on underneath.
Right.
So, right. So I say, he says, you know, we're kind of in this place for a bit. And I was seeing a counselor for a few months for my brother's death. And she's also a couples counselor. And I said, maybe we need to go see Tracy, is her name. And we decided to do that. And we kind of both were all in on that. I mean, I wasn't all in the beginning. Don't get me wrong. I really went for my kids. Right. I really went for my kids. I felt like I owed it to my kids for like, you know, at least 6 months. I kind of was like, no, I know how I feel. This is right. You know, and this relationship is wrong. Like, I was very stubborn because like I said, I kind of had met myself somewhat at that point. I had some self-worth. Like I kind of felt like I deserved it all. I remember saying that to her. I deserve it all. I deserve to be in love. I deserve to feel happy. And she said to me, you do, and you can be, you know, and she wasn't trying to convince me to stay. I remember saying to her, like one of the first sessions, you're not going to make me stay. Like, it's not going to work. And she was like, Amanda, it's not my job. She goes, I don't really care what you do. She goes, my job is to help you heal so that you don't bring this wounded person into the next relationship. Because what I came to learn in therapy is that what was going on for me was this intense fear of future loss due to emotional abandonment in childhood. It all went back to that trauma I spoke about earlier. I have a couple of sexual trauma stories, and then like everything that happened with watching my parents' dysfunctional relationship, the invalidation I received as a child, just lots of issues. I felt very abandoned physically, emotionally, in all the ways. And when my brother died, my brain went into this self-preservation, like hardcore self-protective measure, like just to protect me, and told me, you're never going to have to feel that pain again like you did when your brother died. So we're just going to grieve Jim. That's my husband. We're just going to grieve him and your marriage now. Right. We're just going to get it all over with now so that you never have to feel that way again. And it really, what it came down to was healing the stuff in my past that I never was able to admit or really see or really feel. Right. And that provided me a measure of safety in feeling vulnerable with my husband to break through that invisible shield.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think this is really, really an important part. And I get this all the time where people have been, so it's not quite the same, but it is, in that they've gone through maybe multiple breakups. They've been in a relationship. Now they're going through a divorce, and they are already on to relationship 10 in their life. And they can't wait for this divorce to be over to move in or to get married to the next partner. Mm-hmm. And, you know, there's a reason they say that. Wait at least a year to make big decisions after you go through any kind of grief. And we know that divorce, the loss of a relationship, is a huge grieving thing. So I really appreciate you sharing that personal insight, that your initial response was just to get rid of the relationship and deal with it all at one time, and like, because it's going to happen. Right. So I think that sometimes we don't, like you said, we don't realize what's on the surface, and what seems like a good plan is us reacting from something that's way in our past. So I think
And
that was great to highlight that. Yeah.
thank you. Yeah. So my therapist said, Amanda, you're just going to wind up in the same situation, just with a different person. Might not be that person that you met. It might be somebody else. Who knows? But you're going to wind up in that same exact storm, wondering, how did I get here again? How did I get here again? Because what I would have been doing is just replacing my husband with somebody else who still is going to mirror my wounds. That's what partnership does, right? Partnership shows us the things in ourselves that need to be healed. And it's a lot easier to say, I'm with the wrong person. They're this, they're that. They're not filling my needs. My whole process of healing through healing my marriage was healing the deep wounds and voids inside of myself through working it out with my husband. So like, for example, emotional intimacy was always an issue, right? Because I have some sexual trauma. My parents were never close. I really never saw affection. They fought a lot. I just wasn't comfortable there. I just didn't know the language of it. I had no idea how to do it. And my husband says to me, we go through this process. It's called imago relationship therapy. And imago means image, and it has to do with seeking out kind of qualities in your caretakers that really could not, that they lacked, that you really needed, and you kind of seek those out in your relationship unknowingly. And it's by healing those and being willing to change that for the partner that we wind up filling our voids. So when my husband says, I need you to be more emotionally intimate with me, and I say, well, I don't really know how to do that. And he says, well, are you willing to learn? Are you willing to try to learn? And I say, okay. And in my mind, it's for the sake of the relationship. But by going into those places that feel scary to me and unsafe, I'm not just doing it for the relationship. Yeah, that's the byproduct. It's going to help the relationship, but it's really healing the hole in my soul that feared that. Right. Now, if I never had somebody asking me to do that, if I never had to step into that discomfort to heal this relationship, I would never heal that part of me. That needs that healing. And I sought my husband out specifically to call that to the surface because he has anxiety, PTSD. Obviously, anxiety is a huge component of that.
Right.
He has done his own work too, and I should say that too. I wrote a book, and I say in my book, it takes two to tango. Like two of us got into this mess, two of us are going to have to get ourselves out of it. And he did his own work. I tell him all the time, thank you for doing your work, because if you didn't do your work, we would not be together. Because even though I brought my issues, I was not going to stand for what his PTSD was doing to our children. So he had to do his part too. And I think it's kind of under control now, but generalized anxiety disorder is what I was diagnosed with 6 years ago. So it worked, and I had that anxiety forever, right? So it wasn't like his PTSD really didn't come to a head till about 2016. He had it, but he wasn't vocalized, but I could sense it. And I knew that he wasn't going to push me into that vulnerable space. But as we grow in our recovery and in our spirituality and just maturity, just in life, and things happen in life, we need each other, and we need to go into those safe, connected, vulnerable spaces with each other.
Right.
And I wasn't, and even though I didn't really know how to do it, he didn't really know how to do it. We both needed it. We both yearned for it, even though we didn't know how to get there. So we had to learn. Right. And our therapist taught us. So I did my work alone. He did his work alone. Then we did work together. And that was.
Yeah. And I think that's a key point. So difficult. I always say, marriage is hard. Divorce is hard. There's that old saying, pick your hard, right? Pick what you want to deal with. And for people that are listening that are saying, well, that's great for Amanda, or that's great for Nancy or Kathy or Becky or whoever, but my partner is not willing to acknowledge what they bring to the table, is not willing to work on it, or is, gaslighting me and saying they're working on it, but absolutely making no effort to change. So that component has to be present, right? For this to work. Like, I can work on myself until the cows come home. And if the other person doesn't make any changes, or isn't willing to at least consider the possibility of making changes, you're really just doing it for yourself, which is still great, but you can't fix those kind of relationships, right? I like that it takes two to get into it, two to work through it, not just one person fixing everything for the other person.
Exactly. And I met somebody at a book signing recently. It was a man, And he heard me speak and he came up to me afterward and he's like, I need to get your book. And he told me a little bit of his story. He was going through a divorce and he was willing to do the work and she wasn't.
Right.
And I think it's also an important distinction to point out that we often think it's the men who aren't capable of it and aren't willing to. We have to take an honest look at ourselves too and say, how deep am I willing to go for this relationship really, or to heal myself?
Right.
And to give yourself that gift, right? If you're out there, you're feeling a little resistant, or you might be sensing, hey, maybe this is me, and I don't know, give yourself that gift of healing. That's it. Like your soul is just going to keep knocking at your door to do this work. So if you're in that situation, I highly recommend you start digging a little bit as far as you can.
Yeah. And so I appreciate you saying that, because one of the things I do try, even though I realize most of the people listening are probably women, because this is more a women geared podcast, but I see, it's like this whole, everybody's divorcing a narcissist right now. And I'm not making fun of people that are in emotionally abusive relationships. They're horrible because it's so hard to prove them, right? So I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that's kind of the thing now.
It's a buzzword. It's a buzzword.
Yeah, it's just a buzzword. And I always say, you can be, somebody can be a jerk and not be a cluster B personality disorder individual. So one of the things that I did, where I was going with that is that can be men or women. So I do appreciate you saying that, because I think we do sometimes think that, women are these totally flexible, willing to accommodate, always put everybody first. That may be the gender stereotype, but that's certainly not every individual. Absolutely. So I know one of the things that you focus on, and you've said this a couple of times, kind of alluded to it, but can you talk about how this healing can help you break out of those cycles? And we touched on this in a few podcasts, but the fact that how we see our parents' relationship, or even multi-generational or intergenerational trauma, like how that kind of thing, we need to heal those kind of issues, right? To prevent those cycles. Is that correct?
Yes, I talk a lot about generational family dysfunction, and that's where ultimately this all goes back to, right? We live our learned experiences. It's just as humans, that's what we do. And when we're children, we're looking to our parents for not just direction and guidance, but for survival and approval. And whatever they're doing, we think is the right way to live. We think that that's just how it's done, and we don't question it. And it gets in here so deep in our core, and it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to unlearn, not even relearn, but maybe relearn comes after the unlearn, but to undo. And you got to peel that onion, you got to peel the layers. And for me, I have two children, two daughters, 10 and 12. And even in my, relationship with my husband, how I speak to him, how I act, like I've been doing this work for a while, and it still comes up. It's still, I hear my mother come out of my mouth sometimes, or my father, I can sense myself feeling, pulling away or feeling distant or going back in my shell, especially when my husband gets sick. He gets sick a lot from this chronic respiratory illness from 9/11. He's just getting over COVID right now. And it's a challenge for me to continually step into that discomfort and not run away from it, and have those honest conversations when I see that dysfunction rearing its ugly head.
Right.
So this isn't a one and done thing. This isn't 6 months, a year, 5 years. 5 years. I was in therapy for this last time for 5 years. It's not, it's a continual healing cycle and process that I have to, you go a little bit. It's like, they say it doesn't happen in a straight line healing. It's kind of like this and then like this.
Right.
But as long as I'm going like at least 2 steps forward, even if I take 1 step back, that's good enough for me.
Right.
Because I'm still moving in the right direction. There's still progress being made. A ton of progress has been made, but I know that there's a lot more. There's a lot more. Like when my husband gets sick, I get nasty. I get like little digs here and there. I get frustrated that I have to do all the work around the house. I get, but it's really all goes back to fear of him dying, right? So like that, I don't love you is really, I'm afraid you're going to die.
Right.
So when I sense that coming, I use the tools. I meditate a lot. I pray. I have affirmations when I really need them. I don't rely on affirmations for my self-worth anymore, but when I need them, they come in handy when I'm not liking who I am at the moment. Um, I have friends and support that I talk to. Community is so huge. I talk to friends who are non-judgmental and who are compassionate, and then it shows me to be non-judgmental of myself and to practice that self-compassion, because that's the only way that I'm going to move through the times where I don't really like myself because I'm just repeating that generational pattern. I hope I'm not repeating the trauma. I hope that I'm not passing that on to my kids. But I know, I mean, if I'm completely honest, I know sometimes there's things that'll say, I have to apologize. I apologize to my children. I talk to my children about their feelings. I'm doing it differently, and they're
Mhm.
going to do it better than me.
Right.
I'm not doing it perfect. And that's the whole point of generations to generations. They're going to know more. They're going to have different ways. They're going to look back and say, I can't believe mom did that. I can't believe. But right now, I think that's the right thing to do
Right.
because it's where we're at.
Well, and I know that sometimes, how our parents raised us is how that was seen as the right way to do it at that time,
Yes.
in the human life, in the human sphere, that, like when I grew up, um, that children were to be seen and not heard was still a very real thing. Like if we had company over, and my mom and dad were great. They were kind, loving parents. We did things together. They were, they were very with us and supportive and, very positive people. I had a great childhood, but it was still when people came over to visit, the kids played, we ate, but we sat quiet at the table. We certainly didn't interrupt the adults. We helped clean up the table, and then the parents went and talked in the living room, and we went down in the basement, where our TV was or where games were or whatever. And now you wouldn't think of doing that. Right now kids call adults by their, and we called everybody Mr. and Mrs. It was, so I think sometimes our parents get, and I'm not speaking for everybody, but our parents get blamed for things when it really was a society thing. And you're right. When we change society and when we start doing the great things, like you say, you're doing with your kids, and I think that apologizing to our kids when we do something wrong is so important, right? I think that's a huge shift in parenting.
Yes. Or even asking them, how do you feel about this?
Right.
You know, like we know that my husband is 56. He'll be 57 in January. My kids are 10 and 12, right? If you do the math, even if he lives to a regular 80, 85 years old, my kids will be in their 30s, maybe 40, when he passes away. So when we talk about, things like that, and not to scare them or not, just to kind of appreciate and acknowledge that they are people with
Right.
thoughts, with feelings. And just because we're not like, if we don't talk about it, doesn't mean that they're not thinking about it.
Right.
Doesn't mean that it's not a reality for them. So I think talking about things with my kids, asking them how they feel about stuff is so huge, because if not, they're left to their own devices.
Yeah.
And whatever's going to go on in assumptions and ruminations in their head is going to do more damage than actually getting the truth out on the table that this is our life, this is our reality, and it's okay. Right now, today, everything's fine. We're good, right?
And I think that's a message again that divorcing women in divorce or men in divorce can take away from that and say, yeah, you can talk to your kids. You can say, this is how it is.
Yes.
Mom's going to live in one house, dad's going to live in the other house. This is our
Yep.
life. We've got everything we need. Let's
You're
celebrate.
safe. You're
Let's
safe.
celebrate.
You're
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
We both love you. Yes, it's
Yeah.
just huge. Like you said, like seen and not heard, we didn't really have voices. Our voices were kind of stifled when we were
Right.
children. But it doesn't mean that we didn't have any, it
Yeah.
was just there. And that could sometimes, I think, can do more damage than just talking about
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Normalizing things for your
Absolutely.
children is huge.
Amanda, we have covered a ton of stuff. Somehow we started out on self-healing. We ended up on working with our kids, but that's a
Yeah.
fantastic. I think it's all
Always have.
important, all relevant, all comes together nicely. What do you think is the most relevant thing that we covered today?
I think it's that doing the work, regardless if you stay in the relationship or if you move on to another relationship, is working on that relationship with yourself. That's the most important relationship, because at the end of the day, we truly only have ourselves. So that's that self-love, that self-worth, that self-respect, that is my safety. I don't like, now my husband compliments me instead of validating me, right? I can give all of that to myself. So I think the most important thing is to look at why that last relationship didn't work out. Even if it was 80-20, right? Still look at your 20. Still look at whatever part you played in it or how you felt in it, right? Because that's going to set you free. Allow your relationships, the troubling relationships, to set you free.
Yeah, great message. Amanda, if people want to find out more about what you do or work with you or get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Sure. I'm going to be starting my intuitive grief coaching business. And I believe so much of these relationship problems all go back to grief. I think loss is the main issue that we have trouble with in our society. I'm going to be starting that business in January, and you can find me online on my website, amandamckoyflanagan.com. I'm on Instagram. Again, my name, Amanda McKoy Flanagan, McKoy with a K. I'm also on Facebook, but I mainly focus on Instagram. I have a podcast. It's called Soul Rising Podcast. We talk about all things love, loss, and connection. And I think that's it for now. I will be doing some energy healing work as well come January when I launch my business. I do Reiki. I'm certified level 1 and 2 Reiki, doing some EFT tapping. So I'm going to be incorporating some energy work into my grief coaching as well. So yeah, I'd love to work with you.
Great. So I'm going to make sure all that information gets in the show notes. And I want to, again, Amanda, thank you for sharing these words of wisdom and also for telling us about your journey, because I think it's always helpful to understand some experts in their field often got there because of their own journey through healing. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode of the D-Shift. And don't forget to tune in again to the next one. Thanks for listening and supporting the D-Shift podcast. If you would like to attend live trainings by our amazing guests and have a chance to ask questions and get answers from our experts, join the D-Shift crew. For more details and to sign up, head on over to www.divorcecoachforwomen and click on the podcast page.